I like the MRC definition a little bit better because it ties in that the microgrid doesn't only take power and help its own power, but it can also be used as a resource for the grid. So it can be used in frequency response and other ancillary services. And also, it can deliver power in times of high demand. If the generation on the microgrid is sized properly, or if it's oversized just for that day, where they're able to shed demand and provide power back to the utility. That's a big driver as we go forward in a smart grid, because all these microgrids, you want them to interact, you want them to be able to play together on the smart grid. And being able to do more than just support their own group and island on their own, which will help their reliability, but it doesn't help the reliability of the grid overall. I think that's very important. The DOE definition doesn't get to that level, where it just talks about being able to handle some of your load and about operating an island in position. I think that's leaving a lot off the table as we go forward with microgrids. I think the challenges with the current tariff structure in New York, they've been highlighted quite a bit through the Ruppert proceeding. Stage 2 is going to get more involved in that. One of the biggest issues that everybody always brings up is the standby rates. So if somebody goes and puts in a microgrid and puts in a generator that's going to carry half of their load, they're going to be charged a standby rate without taking into account that they haven't been at that load in a year or however long since the generator went in, provided it's a reliable system. At some level, I think we need to address that for reliable microgrids. It's completely different if it's not a reliable microgrid, but if it's set up in stages so that you don't lose the whole thing, if you have 3 units, or you can prove your reliability over a year or so, I think that the microgrid should see some of the benefit from that. You can look at Co-op City and some of their standby rates that they had over the last couple of years, and it's a lot of money, and it really some of that money can help to put in more microgrids, and it's more offset charges that microgrid can have a value for in the grid if they're not being charged by that, by the utility. However, on the other hand, the utility does need to be compensated for that excess capacity if they can't use it. So I think some technical level, there's controls out there, there's other ways that it can be handled to make sure that they don't go over a certain load limit without charging them for the excess capacity that they don't ever feel that they're going to need. Another piece is net metering. Obviously, it's been probably pushing 20 years that we've had net metering in New York, and that was a great way to get PV interest and financeability going. However, it puts a burden on all those that don't use net metering. And it's not a long-term solution for it. Something needs to be done for that to allow more renewables going onto the grid as we go forward. Transactive tariff policies, that is one of the solutions for it. A couple other states, I believe Minnesota has another way that they're going about doing it instead of net metering. And that needs to come out because net metering doesn't help the utility. There is a cost to utility, so it's shared by all the other utility users on the system. That's really not fair for the people who don't have PV. And I think it's important as these go forward that everybody has a financial stake in it and there's a benefit for them. With the transactive energy policy, everybody that uses the wires, they'd be paying the utility for something, and every transaction on the utility system, there would be a charge for it, and people would be compensated based on the use of the system or delivering the system or supplying power. That would be a great way to be able to isolate some of this and make sure everyone's compensated for using the system. I think it's great that they're talking about doing pilots. It's a huge problem that we're trying to do, getting microgrids in and getting everybody to understand what they are and the financial implications of it. As one of the people on the panel today said, that there are going to be problems as you go forward. You know, we want to fall forward. We're definitely going to find problems. We're going to fix problems with pilots. That's why you do pilots. I think Rev and New York Prize is doing a good thing with pushing the utilities to come up with a couple pilot projects, because as soon as you need to get the parties in the room and start building something to be able to really understand some of the issues. As with every other pilot, you're going to find that some of the things that you thought were a big problem are actually going to go away, and you're going to find a whole bunch of things that you had never thought of, and you're going to end up being a problem. So I think it's very important as a next step. One of the things I think for pilots would be really good is, you know, there's a lot of smart inverters, a lot of smart battery chargers out there right now. They can interact with the distribution system. So it ties more into the smart grid. So you have the smart grid over the top of the microgrids, and they can interact with the smart grid to allow the distribution utility to take more of the benefit from what the microgrid is, whether it's volt bar support, you know, power factor, obviously management, instead of the utility having to put on regulators and capacitors. There's technology out there with inverters, and I think with a pilot like that, working through some of the communication hurdles and how it would be controlled, and that level of discussion is going to be really important going forward in a smarter grid, because you're starting to tie everything together. I think some of the bigger lessons learned from campus-style microgrids are, you know, nothing's ever easy. It always comes down to money. For a lot of them, I guess campus is a little bit different, because a lot of campuses do see more of the environmental benefit from them. But the community are different because of the utility right-of-way that you have to get into. You know, but the financing structure in a campus style is going to have to change, because there's different people that are tied in, different owners, so different liabilities that tie in. But you know, there's a lot of technology out there. The campus style has used a lot of them between PV, batteries, and CHP. So I think it's going to be a combination of all those technologies as you go forward in your community-based microgrid. I thought today's discussion was great for the level of involvement. It was a full room, a lot of different questions where sometimes they'll all be kind of focused in the same direction. This one really hit a variety of questions kind of going forward into, you know, level of AMI, future for residential microgrids, kind of how do you break different classes down to be able to put microgrids at different levels. I thought that was really interesting. A couple people brought up the government and the process to get things approved for reliability in New York. I think, you know, in New York City specifically, I think that's some of the things that you forget about that come out in the pilot as you start going forward trying to do this, and you run into review boards and you understand this is going to take a little bit longer, a little bit more needs to be done. A lot of education has to be done out there with newer technology, as it always is. So that was one of the takeaways. There's a lot of interest, a lot of things going on. A lot of people, different people talked about the projects that they were working on, which is great to hear. Another piece I thought was great was the amount of discussion with Con Ed and their level of involvement in these projects, that they're involved early on, and it really needs to be a partnership with the utilities, because when a developer brings a project to the utility that the utility hasn't seen, it takes longer to get kind of everybody on the same page, and to see that they're involved early, I think is really important for the education of Con Ed and the developers on their different processes to make this go forward and be successful.